So briefly, today's agenda is what is the VDC bundle, VDC workflows, and how does the VDC bundle deliver value? So when you look at the VDC bundle, it comes with 3 key products. So we have Autodesk BIM Collaborate, which some of you may already be familiar with, which is basically almost no different than BIM Collaborate Pro. The only difference is it simply does not have the work sharing aspect, but otherwise it's all of Autodesk Docs, all of Autodesk BIM Collaborate Pro, all the design module, the model coordination module, all of those things. Then we have Assemble Systems here, which is really a conditioning tool where you have your model. You can bring that into Assemble to condition it, to push parameters into it. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's basically for conditioning and enriching that model with more data, more information. And then we have a newer product here, Autodesk Tandem, which is really about the digital twin. It's about taking all this data and creating a digital representation of your completed project. So this is different than a designer creates design intent. Autodesk Tandem is kind of your as-builts that we used to do in, for hand drafting in AutoCAD, but in the Revit environment, the model environment, right? So it's a digital representation of the completed building as opposed to the design intent. So again, when we look at Autodesk BIM Collaborate, it's about design collaboration, it's about communication, model coordination, which is the clash detection engine in there. It's the issues ecosystem, which is basically managing those issues all the way through design, all through Autodesk Build and Autodesk Takeoff and all of those things there. And it's also about document management. So once our models are at a certain point where they're fairly complete, we start getting into Assemble, right? For the model conditioning side of things here. So this tool, of course, allows us to take these models, break them up in better ways that can help do basically quantity takeoff and break the models up in ways that Revit doesn't natively do, right? Revit breaks things down into families and other things where Assemble Systems can create them more into groupings of things that are more relatable to someone who's doing takeoff quantification, basically. It also has the ability to understand if a model changes, what changes between version 1 and version 2 when there are updates. It has the ability to kind of do, work in place tracking, right? Where we can actually look at a model and see what's been installed, what's completed, and it will visually color code the model indicating these elements have been constructed, these elements have been ordered or in the process of being built, or there's problems or there are delays and so on. And it can also break the model down into components that can then be fed into a tool like Primavera or Microsoft Project to help better schedule the actual physical things in the model that can be then moved into a true scheduling tool, but it can do those initial scheduling aspects of the physical aspects of the building, the foundations and the steel and the exterior walls and the curtain walls and so on there. And it can also take data and push that data into a model that is required for facilities management later. So there are certain, Revit already has attributes in the model as it is, but there are certain things that are simply not there. Assemble can take a list of requirements from your facilities management team. Here are all the things that we need to be embedded in the model so that we can track it in a facilities management tool. And Assemble Systems can gather that data and actually push it back into the model. And then inside of BIM Collaborate, the VDC manager could come in there and see that data, knowing that when it then gets moved into Tandem, all the data that is required for the facilities management aspect, which is what Tandem is all about, is there. And then we start using Autodesk Tandem to specify the asset requirements, manage the data. It's all about managing the data inside of a model, but for a facilities management workflow. So really, Tandem is kind of like that last piece of the Autodesk Construction Cloud where we're actually already past handover, right? We're using this as one of the tools to help manage the completed project and kind of hand over to the owner. So, this is a typical workflow. So when we look at this VDC bundle here, it's really targeted towards the type of people who would be a VDC manager, virtual design and construction manager, right? Where they're not doing the design work, but they're, especially in a design build firm or even just a construction firm, they have their hands and need visibility into all aspects of the project, right? So we have all the different kind of aspects of the project up top here. We have design collaboration, that's the design, model conditioning, model coordination. We have 3D quantity takeoff, and then of course 2D quantity takeoff is in there. Work in place tracking, that's what during the actual construction of the building. The digital twin creation, and then of course the assets lifecycle is the facilities management. You know, your asset could be a HVAC, an air handling unit that needs to be maintained, a condenser unit, a pump, anything that basically needs to be maintained in the building. Those are the assets, right? So when you look at that first part there, you know, those first kind of 3 chunks there, that's where the designers and engineers are fairly heavily involved, right? We're designing things, we're getting the model ready, we're doing model coordination, looking for, obviously, clash avoidance is our key there. And then once that's done, it kind of goes, depending on if it's design build or it's going out for bid, the pre-construction manager, the estimating manager, gets in there and starts quantifying things that are in the building to determine, well, how much will the materials cost, how much labor, and what's the total cost of construction, right? And then once that's done and someone wins a bid or a design bid, it just moves into construction. Then we can start using assemble systems there to use the work in place tracking to be able to look at a 3D model and see by color coding of the different elements, what's been built so far, what hasn't been built. Is there something that has an issue and that's why it's marked in red because it's a problem installing something, whatever. And then of course, as a building is being built and things are being put into their real positions, which is quite often different than some of the design intent, that's when we start enriching that digital twin, right? Where we start putting all the, as the thing is actually built information into this model that then of course feeds into asset life cycles and so on there, which would be the facilities management downstream tools and such. And Autodesk is already starting to work more deeply with different types of plugins and things that will work with Tandem that will have more interactions with other facilities management products that are out there. But again, the whole point of the VDC manual is package here really, is that so a VDC manager or those who need that transparency into the entire workflow here, especially when they hand it over to the client, have that visibility. They're not managing these processes per se, they're managing the entire process. And they, like I said, they need their hands in all of it. So ultimately here, you know, we have all these different things, right? We have the, you know, the gather requirements, asset lifecycle management, 3D quantity takeoff, work in place tracking, model conditioning. But ultimately, it's all about capturing all of the data into a single source of truth, right? So the Autodesk Construction Cloud is becoming the central repository for the data. And then we have these different tools that live within this ecosystem, right? And that's what we're really talking about here. That's what this VDC bundle is about, that aspect of it. What does a VDC manager need transparency into? So kind of that first product and one of the first ones that came out there was Autodesk BIM Collaborate, which anyone here who does any Revit designing is already familiar with this and has access to this using, you know, BIM Collaborate Pro or just BIM Collaborate. The BIM Collaborate aspect of BIM Collaborate Pro is meant for the managers, the people who are not editing Revit but need control and visibility into the entire design process. They're just not the ones drawing the walls, putting the windows in and doing that work, but they're doing everything else. So that gives them full transparency into the packages and the swim lanes that you see, and then the project timeline for distributing model to the different teams during the design phase. They have full visibility and ability to actually do the clash detection, manage the clash detection, monitor the clash detection to make sure that all our trades are coordinated. So things like that pipe going through the ductwork up there in that image don't happen, right? And it's about, you know, making sure we collect everything, even identifying assets in there to be part of that. When we start getting into Autodesk Build, those can be derived directly from these models. And it's also about the issue ecosystem here. So anyone who's used any of the Autodesk Construction Cloud when it comes to products such as Docs, Build, Quantity Takeoff, and of course, BIM Collaborate, all understand that the issues are by far the most important part of the system. It's the primary communication tool. In some respects, I find firms are not utilizing it enough because this can literally reduce maybe 50% of the email load that you get when you're starting to look at that issue ecosystem there. And the issue system starts at Docs. It's visible through the entire process, at least on the BIM collaborate, docs, and build and quantity takeoff side of things. That's where the issue ecosystem lives. But you can invite anyone into the system, and then of course forward those issues to those people to make sure that they're aware of problems, action items that need to happen. And it's also, of course, the master document management place for the entire system, where the other tools such as Assemble and Tandem really target the models. BIM Collaborate is the models, but it's also any other documentation that's part of the project that you can invite those people into as well. So then, once a design is at a certain point and the model is ready to start with the cost estimation, right? That's where we're really going in, is doing the quantification that then lead into the other third-party apps that you actually use for doing your cost estimation. This is about getting all the data ready for that. So you can basically link the models directly from BIM Collaborate directly into Assemble, and then you start breaking that model up into ways that Revit doesn't natively break the model up, and put it into groupings that you would group different aspects of how they would be quantified for filling out that cost management later. And it's also about organizing the building into areas and the order that they would be constructed in. So we start getting into some of that scheduling. This is not meant to be your entire scheduling tool. It's meant simply to schedule the physical aspects of the model so that you can then bring it into the overall scheduling of the entire project using something like Primavera or Microsoft Project, right? So it takes that model, conditions it, and what it can also do is you can have a set of parameters that you need to be into the assets, into the equipment in the model that are going to be used for facilities management. So Assemble can gather that data and actually push these parameters into the actual Revit model. So again, you'd start with that Collaborate Pro, or I should say just BIM Collaborate, go to Assemble Systems, condition the model, quantity takeoff, start your scheduling during the pre-construction stage. As things develop, you can build in the placeholders that would then be pushed into the model that would then move into Autodesk Tandem for the handover to the client. So that's where Assemble Systems basically fits into this equation. And of course, a VDC manager needs to be able to have transparency into all of these processes and direct all of these processes. And then I'll let Alan take on here to go a little bit deeper into what Autodesk Tandem can do. So if you want to take off from here, Alan.
Tandem, capturing basically where Scott took off and the information that is input, where Assemble plays a huge role for, again, the non-authoring folks who maybe need to just condition the information and add metadata that wasn't captured through the life cycle of design. We moved into construction and we're needing to add that additional asset data. This is where a digital twin will take over. So we've now got that much more comprehensive data set of that we are going to move into Tandem with. And in doing so, we have this digital twin environment. If anybody has been paying attention for the last 15 years, BIM, 15, 20 years ago, BIM was the quote unquote buzzword. And now for the last few years, we've had digital twin as a buzzword. And as we move forward into the next phase, the next, the future, the next few years of the BIM world, the VDC, and all these things start to come together. And ultimately, everybody's familiar with, big data and IoT, Internet of Things, and all this information that has been captured throughout the life cycle of the design process, and then even moving into construction. And so now that we've designed and we've conditioned the model, and now we have this additional information, we are able to move along into the Tandem phase. And we've captured it, it's all in the cloud, it's now all accessible. With Tandem, where are we right now? Well, we're at where we've been for a long time, and facility owners and managers aren't necessarily capturing all of the information that, or not that they're not capturing it, but they aren't really utilizing it, the information, correct? So we hand over all these documents, they go and they sit in a file folder cabinet. They're not easily accessible. You have to go and travel from one building to the other to go get it, etc. That's the point of the digital twin, being that moving from today into tomorrow into the future, we're going to be able to fully realize the benefit of all the data that we've put into the building up to this point. And now we hand over, and tomorrow we're going to be able to actually access that information. It's a richer data set. It's going to be live, and it's going to be moving from where we now deliver an as-build, we move into the era of what we'll call, as maintained. So what are we doing when we move into a digital twin environment? Well, we're creating we go and develop the project up on the cloud, the Tandem environment. We create the facility, and then we have to input our classifications. That information will follow along from the data that we've already input into the ACC build project through the design and assemble processes. And that data will all be nice and configured and so on. And now now that data becomes the next phase of a living and breathing model. Note that, again, we're pulling information that we've already input from the Revit and the BIM Collaborate, and then on the Docs environment, we can pull that over directly into Tandem, such that we are now in this next phase. And again, it's accessible through the cloud. You don't need you don't have to have something local. It's no downloads or anything. It's just up there on the cloud. And in the Tandem interface, noticing that we have the ability to do all this classification of assets and so on. What are we currently handing over right now? What is the data that we're handing over? If you're utilizing, Kobe data or building smart information, things like that, we're able to utilize that information, whereas now maybe it's not even being, again, it's that pile of paper that's handed over. It's not becoming actionable, utilized in the facilities stage and the operations stages. So we move on to the next phases, and now it is beyond what we started off with years ago, being a building information model, turning into an asset information model. And in this phase, we are now able to, with tools like Tandem and in partnership and integrations that are to come with other types of, with building management systems, CMMS, et cetera, these integrations will now allow us to have this much richer data set that is, a database. We're all familiar with, most likely familiar with Revit being a model-based database, 3D model-based database. Well, now that moves into the next phase where that model-based database is going to be connected to live building information, which is our Internet of Things. If you have assets that you need to track where the building has temperature control, all of these things are now able to be accessed in the digital twin environment, and they're able to better inform us and give us better predictability and forecasting for the building's systems. And we're all familiar with handovers at this point. What we have been doing up to this point. Well, what is a descriptive or even informative handover? And I would say that we're already into the predictive realm of handover for our models to our owners at handover, where we have data that is input and it's a rich data set to this point, and so we are informed. But then ultimately we want to get to that more comprehensive data set so that we have IO&Ms, we have product data, we have hard manuals that we can go and access on the cloud directly from those the model elements. And ultimately, again, moving into the big data and the Internet of Things, IoT data from those sensors and equipment that we're tracking, have that information reporting to us. And again, right there on the cloud in that digital twin model. And so when we capture all of these together for our VDC, for the VDC bundle, it is a collaborative process through the BIM Collaborate in the design phase. We're going from the beginning all the way through the end, and through tandem, through the life cycle of being able to design it, get your napkin sketch, get through construction, and then build and operate the building in through the entire life cycle. And so with these three products, you don't necessarily, as a VDC manager, you aren't necessarily touching on all aspects of it, but these tools allow you to have touch points at all phases. So again, we start from the very beginning. It is a continuous data set from design through pre-construction, construction, and then into handover and operations. This allows us to deliver better decision making, be more informed, and have ideas and forecasting and predictability into how everything will operate. These tools, again, with the bundle, we have access to all, so we have a more collaborative environment. Everyone is able to collaborate and work together and bring the teams, bring everyone together in one environment. And ultimately, at handover, we have a better quality product. And I think one of the things that is most important, kind of in reference to what BIM used to be, and now what, as a buzzword, and now digital twin is, I guess you could say, somewhat of a buzzword still. It really introduces another level for AEC companies, insofar as you're able to go to the next level, you're able to deliver that more comprehensive product, and ultimately something that can begin to integrate with facilities management systems and become that autonomous data digital twin model. And that is where you're going to find your company able to differentiate and kind of just be separate from other competitors in the market. So when we adopt these tools, we begin to differentiate our deliverables, and we can put a good face on what we deliver. Ultimately, depends on what solutions in the Autodesk Construction Solutions package you're looking at, but with the VDC bundle, you have unlimited users in particular, unlimited projects, you have those solutions, BIM Collaborate, Assemble in Tandem, as we discussed. And again, we're maximizing the value of the end-to-end life cycle. So we go from the very beginning all the way through the entire life cycle. We're actually able to touch at all phases of the building delivery. And if we have any questions, please chime in.